end on a positive note. So what kind of vision should we be pushing for moving forward? So among women's groups in Egypt and also your own personal vision, what do you see as a way forward from the Arab Spring that would be empowering for women? And what kinds of reforms do you think would be good? How, in conjunction with that, has the fact that the government is sort of shunning both secular and Islamic feminists, has that brought them closer together in a post-Arab Spring world because they face a common battle? Or are there sort of the secular feminists fighting on one front and the Islamic feminists on another? Tell us, moving forward, what is sort of the vision that you have for the future and how different groups play a role?
Okay, thank you. That's a very good question. I'm going to try to end on a positive note. Okay, with all this, despite all what I said and the situation as we see it as negative now, people are still pushing forward for and pushing hard for the rights of women, and they are lobbying for representation. And that young men and women in particular, they are fighting despite the fact of them being subjected to military trials. Both young men and women, Ala Abdel Fattah, now he's in prison after military trial. Asma Mahfouz also was about to go to prison for military trial. That we protested to get her out. So she got out because she was outspoken and she is fighting for dignity and equality for everybody. But we're still hopeful that young men and women will be fighting still, and they will not lose hope despite all the crackdown from this to military council in order to build an egalitarian and a just new order in Egypt. Women needs to push hard for a regime change and understand that this revolution is about regime change, not gender issues, and to frame their issues in a broader national context or as a national issue, that they are fighting for justice, equality, and dignity for both men and women, for young and the old, for the Christian and the Muslim, equal citizenship for all. When it comes to what women are doing right now, I just want to raise the, bring one example of Hiba Raouf. She's a professor of political science, and she is an activist. She's an Islamic feminist, though she hates to admit it. You have to explain that. Hiba doesn't think there is such thing as Islamic feminism, and she doesn't like the term feminism. And she thinks that using Islamic and feminism is very redundant, because inside Islam there is a kind of feminism. So in her activism, Hiba Raouf focuses on civil society and the public sphere. Okay, the government does not want to involve us. Toz for government. We don't want the government. Okay? The government doesn't want us. Political parties don't want us. We don't want them. Okay? So Hiba focuses on her activism on civil society and the public sphere instead of the state as a space for women activism. She views the state as a static entity that does not provide much hope for participatory engagement. For her, the forming of a Muslim public sphere or Egyptian public sphere would enable men and women to hold the state accountable. This form of activism promises more inclusive, pluralistic, civic, and voluntary civil society that maximizes women participation and engagement. When it comes to the issue that you raised of secular feminists and Muslim feminists working together in Egypt, we are finding it very hard to get any secular and Muslims working together, men and women. That's why we see the clash between secular parties and Islamic parties. Similarly, the same clash or the same division between secular feminists and Islamic feminists. Hoda Badran, from a secular background, she just relaunched the Egyptian Women Union, which included a number of secular women NGOs, and did not invite any of the Islamist women's group, even the more centrist, we can say liberal NGOs like Women in Memory Forum, for example. But women, they are very outspoken, and they are very, very much stronger, very much confident. They are very much positive and forward-looking. They're saying that we've been waiting for, you're having a new baby. this democracy. It's a new baby. When you have this new baby, you're not going to care about gender. Whether a boy or a girl, we're just waiting for this baby. Democracy, okay? Dignity and justice for everybody, and that will include eventually men and women, and we will continue to fight for that. Happy note. Happy ending.
And what I wanted to ask Jennifer to close with is also sort of a two-pronged question. Does WLP address the issue of Islam directly in their work? Is this something that comes up? And as WLP moves forward, what vision do they have, and how would Islam play or not play a role in that vision moving forward?
So again, this is a complicated question, and it's come up in different forms over the course of today's discussions as well. But in bringing our partners together, each organization is connected through a shared vision, and one of the core aspects of our approach is Islam is the context in which we work, but not the framework for how we work, which is somewhat different from the approach of a lot of other organizations. That's not to say that we approach what we do on the ground without consideration for local religions, local cultures. Some of our partners do work directly with tools such as textual interpretation, and that is the key approach in their context. So we come from the idea that there are universal rights. We don't necessarily talk about them in the context of the international instruments. In some cases we do when it's appropriate context, but in many cases that is not going to be relevant. What we find is if you go into a small workshop and start asking people what's important to them, the issues that come out are reflective of a value set that you would find in something like the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There are common values that cut across all religions. They might be articulated differently. There are some that are going to be specific to certain religious contexts. So when we work with our partners and ask them to come together and share some of their approaches and the strategies that have worked most effectively, the means of communicating within an Islamic framework is a tool that we share, but we also ask the organizations to share the other mechanisms that have been useful. So some of the tools that we have, like our Guide to Equality in the Maghreb, reflect not only how do you approach religious doctrine when you're trying to make arguments for women's equality in the family, but what are the constitutional frameworks, what are the legislative frameworks in your context? What are the social frameworks that you're having to respond to? What are the real life implications of the inequalities that everybody faces? And then what are the international human rights frameworks for those who are trying to be more activists at a technical level? They have that tool as well. So it's one of many tools. We don't consider ourselves secular in the sense that we are anti-religious, going back to the citation of Professor Al-Naim earlier this morning. And it is, we understand that is very contentious in the dialogue that we choose to engage in. So we're very careful with our vocabulary, but are grounded in a universalist principle.
All right, I think at this point we're going to open it up to questions. Can somebody else come help with the mic, possibly? Oh, there you are, the mic person. You want to take that side? Questions? Oh, that was wired. So we can move that over there. Yeah. That's okay. Oh, why don't you grab the other mic? Oh, because yeah, you want me up at the front. Got it.
I have a question that was specific to Egypt. You were speaking about the difficulty that secularists and non-secularists have, feminists have in sort of building a movement together. And I was wondering how much socioeconomic differences feed that. Are the secularists and non-secularists divided along socioeconomic lines? So it's not.
It's a frame of reference. Again, this is a division. It's like it's the frame of reference. What should be our frame of reference? Is it the Quran or is it the universal standards? Okay.
Hi, I actually have a question for each of you ladies up front. To the Women's Learning Partnership, I had a question about the King of Morocco. Like, what were his reservations specifically about women's rights, and then how did you what kind of campaign and tactics did you use to kind of convince him that CEDAW was worthwhile? And the second question is, how have both secular and religious feminists address the Coptic question? Where do they see themselves in that as a completely different religious question? So then how do they see themselves within the context of women's rights in Egypt?
So in the Moroccan context, the current king has actually had a reputation there for being somewhat progressive with regard to women's rights, and I think that was one of the key steps to making that happen. It's called the Equality Without Reservation campaign, and it is regional, but it's been housed basically by a Moroccan partner. This is a campaign, as I mentioned earlier, that it's very hard to communicate at the grassroots level. So this has been one that's taken place more at a level of national level advocacy, trying to raise awareness with members of the diaspora, and just trying to call attention to the inconsistencies between what's happening in national law and what the obligations really are under this international instrument. It's a very challenging campaign to work in, and basically, even when the king announced the removal of reservations, there became kind of a circular set of arguments. He wanted to remove them because he felt like with the Reformed Family Code in 2004, that the Moroccan law was already consistent with CEDAW, so there was no problem. The counter-argument is that whether there would be primacy of international versus national law, which is something that actually in the recent constitutional reform was also resolved right after the country formally lifted the reservations. In their new constitution now, they actually have given primacy to international law, which is an important step forward and really trying to bring those rights together. The issue of removal of reservations is critical because there are also countries that have no reservations and are deeply disconnected in terms of what their national legislation suggests as well. And of course, that's one of the concerns that the U.S. would also have in certain aspects of it. So it's not a good example of a grassroots campaign. It's more of an information campaign and a lobbying campaign in order to just see that there is consistency between the sets of law.
When it comes to the Coptic question, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this question because honestly I don't know. Never heard of either secular feminists or Islamic feminists talking about the Coptic question because this is a very sensitive question. It has always been dealt with on the state level. Okay, this what they call this malaf or this file of issue has been dealt by the state. Through different initiatives like Beit al-Aila or the House of the Family in order to get Muslim leaders and Christian leaders together to solve various problems. So it's either on the state level or on the level of religious leaders coming together, trying to find out, to find a way out from this tension between Muslim and Christian. Recently, we have seen some retreat from the state in dealing with this issue. So the state will not be directly involved in this issue, but will delegate it to one of the religious leaders to deal with it. And recently, what happened in Minya, for example, they sent a Salafi controversial imam to deal with it, Sheikh Muhammad Hassan, to sit together and instead of trying to solve the problem, he actually made the matter worse. And this is very dangerous for the state to be absent from an important issue like this and leave it to some religious leaders.
I think at this point, because we have about